questi giorni esce in libreria per Liberilibri La mente libera. La mente libera, ovviamente c'è un'assonanza nel titolo, con la mente servile, questo nuovo libro di Minogue. La mente libera è un libro del 1963, completato in questa bella edizione italiana da una nuova prefazione, da una più recente edizione americana e da una prefazione scritta apposta per questa traduzione. We said before that you are of two minds about democracy, but by reading the Liberal Mind, and also your new introduction to the Liberal Mind, it seems you're of two minds about liberalism as well. Is that a correct statement?
Yes. All of these abstract words, of course, generate at least two minds, if not more minds. I'm a classical liberal, of course, in part. I'm also a conservative, because I'm concerned in politics simply with the state, not with society. I think we have to take society as it is. But what I was concerned about in the Liberal Mind is the way in which, how shall I put it? It's the way in which arguments for freedom, which are arguments about how we in Western European societies actually live, were transposed into arguments for increasing state control. Indeed, virtually arguments generating a form of servility, I think. And the way in which this was done was by saying, how can you be free? You can't be free if you're hungry, or if you don't have a bit of money, or if you have no culture. We must provide these things, and then people can be free. But of course, that's simply untrue. The working classes in European countries, particularly in the course of the 19th century, were very proud of their independence and certainly were free. It wasn't a matter of the rich are free and the poor are unfree. So it's that change of drift, so that liberalism became almost the opposite of what it had started out to be. That's the thing that has preoccupied me in the Liberal Mind.
They need to find two villains in this construction of the evolution or the involution of liberalism. I will name Bentham and John Stuart Mill. Am I very far from your mind in this sense?
Well, Bentham is, as somebody has said, he simply believes that virtue is profit. It's all a matter of what the consequences are, and whether you like them or not. And this is obviously something that we rationally take account of, but it doesn't tell you anything very much about whether you ought to be doing something or not doing it. John Stuart Mill is in many ways an admirable figure, but nonetheless there is a kind of dream that he has of people being experimental and having lives that he regards as free. And I think that's led to this modern vogue for imagining that if you're transgressive and if you contest the opinions of other people, that means you're free and a thrusting thinker who has original ideas. And of course, freedom is a way of life. It's not a constant struggle in which people are demonstrating that they're different from other people. It is this failure of the conservative element in freedom that is Mill's main defect, in my view.
Before you said something very important, which is, as a classical liberal, I am concerned in politics, let's put it this way, with government, not with society. Well, that's of course, I mean, when we're getting into this kind of quote-unquote liberalism, Mill to, I don't know if you can consider him a liberal, but he clearly sometimes he claimed he was. Keynes even to more recent people of TSN, for example. The point you see is that they are, as concerned with society as they are concerned with government. And the point is that they want to use government to make society better, as you said, to eradicate social evil, and so on and so forth. In the introduction to the Italian edition of the Servile Mind, you quote instead the American Declaration of Independence. That's, of course, slightly before the rise of utilitarianism, but over there is the pursuit of happiness. There's no happiness as something you can basically make a social arithmetics of. We'd like to comment on this point, on the difference in between the sages of the American Revolution and instead, the happiness utilitarian roots of social engineering.
Well, there are two ways in which you can do this. If you ask, what is the opposite of justice? I don't quite know what the opposite is. I mean injustice, obviously, in one sense. But justice in the ordinary sense of law and order is a restriction on the things you can do. Social justice is the opposite of a restriction. It is, in fact, an entitlement to certain things. So that is, I think, a total misuse of the word justice. It's a misuse of the word justice which begins by begging the question about the kind of society you live in. Now, similarly, the American Declaration of Independence took over this more or less philosophical account of rights, the right to life, liberty, and property, as Locke said it. And Jefferson brilliantly said, all the pursuit of happiness. That's fine, because pursuing happiness doesn't guarantee where you will arrive. But now the system of rights has moved beyond these formal rights of a civil society into a set of social and economic rights, which again are entitlements. So in both cases, you move from formal civil society considerations to a program of social change, and that's the difference.
Well, these ideas are, of course, usually popular. They're far more popular than classical liberalism.
Indeed.
But isn't there one of the problems is that somehow people want more out of political ideas than what classical liberalism can promise them?
They want more out of society if they're poor, I suppose, if they're vulnerable. And I suppose the real key to this is that what began as a concern in the 19th century with the difference between the rich and the poor slowly expanded. I think feminism was one of the great changes. Women discovered that they were vulnerable to prejudice. Now, women are 50% of the population, or more or less. So you had women of the poor, and then you had homosexuality, and then you had ethnic immigrants to this country. And then, indeed, you could move on to children who were sometimes victim of abuse, and old people who were not treated properly in their old age. The whole category of vulnerability as the era of the state, as the responsibility of the state, was the most astonishing change that has slowly come about. And it looks as if, in order to improve the condition of the vulnerable, the state must get more power. But the reality of the situation is, in order that the state should get more power, we must extend the range of vulnerable people. And that is the political reality of the situation, rather than the sentimental idealist view of it.
Isn't this a great step back from the very idea of individuality?
individuality gets lost under these circumstances, because instead of construing individuals as moral agents, they are now construed in terms of the different logic by which they are simply the playthings of social circumstance.
It's like you say, we're going back to tribalism.
I don't know about tribalism, no, I don't know about that, but we're going back to a kind of determinism which leaves no room for freedom.